Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ramiro from Anticonquista. Anticonquista is an anti-imperialist media collective. Our content is produced by and for the Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. And today we have the honor of having our good comrade, one of the realest revolutionary artists out there, Immortal Technique, Felipe Coronel, an award-winning revolutionary hip-hop artist with roots in Peru. Shout out to Peru, and Harlem, New York. Shout out to Harlem. I'm born and raised in New York. He's also involved with Rebel Army Runs, a grassroots charity organization and food initiative that donates essential supplies, food, and goods to neglected communities in New York and LA. And so we're excited to speak with Tech today about everything going on in the U.S. You know, we have Trump just got out of office, these racists who stormed the Capitol, but then also another racist coming in to replace him, another imperialist, Joe Biden. And so I just want to get the thoughts from Comrade Immortal Technique, who is not only a talented musician, but also has cutting edge political views. So how's everything going out there in New York, man?
Well, here in New York, things are obviously, people are struggling because they live in a quote unquote post-pandemic world. But I remind people that when we got back to the norm of everything, the norm of everything wasn't normal. The idea that a person that lived here for 40 years and spent a handful of months in another country as an infant and could be torn out of their car and deported to a place they didn't even know, or that a man like Khalif Broward spent years in a prison cell rotting over a backpack, shows you that there was nothing normal about the world that we came from. And I'm pretty sure that most of your viewers and listeners understand that. Previous to Mr. For Mr. Trump coming into office, we had an Obama regime where people had this impression that there were no scandals. And I saw something on Twitter. There was some underrated tweet where someone wrote, well, yeah, in a militaristic society, dropping a drone strike and killing dozens of people at a wedding party in Afghanistan or Yemen, that's not considered a scandal. But to the worldwide community, part of my language, but that's a fucking scandal. That's horrible. And I feel like we shouldn't be lulled into the idea that just because a bigot like Trump is gone, that the policies that he utilized and were utilized against our people are gone as well. Those institutions are still here. For example, I get into these interesting conversations with people that I've known in my family or for a long time, and their immediate response to any criticism of immigration during the Trump years was the easy sidestep or deflection to say, hey, Joe Biden or Mr. Obama built the cages. And my response to that was always, well, thank you for that, enlightening piece of information. But now who made good use of that? And what we're seeing in this era, my brother Ramiro, is we're seeing people and the right wing fighting on the back foot. So they're embarrassed about DC. And now these people are toting, I'm serious, they're toting this philosophy that it was really leftists who stormed the Capitol in DC. Antifa stormed DC. I can't wrap my head around this, but this is how far we've gotten. And I'll be honest with you, can I make it personal here on this show? I've had people in my life that went QAnon on me. And I was like, listen, dude, I can't, this is a psyop. This is some shit that it's like flat earth. You're getting to see how far you can push me to what I believe in to distract me from the real issue. Kind of like what the Democrats are doing now by putting Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. Nobody asked for that. People want reparations from the major financial institutions in this country that benefited from slavery. People want land back from outlying parts around the reservations and indigenous people. And we, as so-called Latinos, have to accept that that is the core of who we are on this continent. This is an indigenous continent. We have to stop. And when it comes to the race relations in the new democratic era, I think that people have to remember the hustle that Democrats and Republicans both play with Black and brown people, right? Like I have a lot of brothers and they're very, very about the community here in Harlem. And we have these wonderful conversations because we could be so honest with each other. And we laugh when we hear other people spread this propaganda. Like they go to the Latino community and they have the audacity to say these Black people bring crime with them. And I say to my black brothers and sisters, no, you were brought here as a crime. These people brought the crime with them. Your presence here in this country is the result of a kidnapping and a crime, and no reparations paid unless they were paid to the slave master. And then you know what these same hustlers do? These are the real race hustlers. They're the Republicans and then the fake liberals, the neoliberals that come in, and they say to the black community, well, we have your reparations money, but we gave it to immigrants. That's the biggest. So you have imagine you run into somebody on the street who got billions of dollars and they owe you 12 cents. And they say, well, I was going to give you your 12 cents, homie, but I ran into this bum and I gave it to a homeless person. Or I gave it to, I bought a cup of coffee and now I can't afford this. Or I did anything with it. Or I lost it in the gutter. Anything that they can imagine. And you really start to say to yourself, you really think they're not giving you what they're supposed to give you because they gave it to us? As if they can't snap their fingers and come up with $1 trillion for a new war. So I feel like we've entered this age of information where it's not good enough just to say, oh, both parties are corrupt. The real question is, how does their corruption affect different communities, and how? How does it affect the so-called Latino community, right? I'm a product of New York City like yourself, so I've experienced the liberal racism, the idea of, oh, he speaks so well. Well, how did you get this? That's a wonderful idea, and then the condescension. But just because I can appreciate honesty doesn't mean that I appreciate people being blatant about their racism, right? Or blatant about the inescapable sickness that comes with their belief system. And unfortunately, what we're facing now is the meltdown of both of these systems. You see a capitalist society that's melting down, and we see the old world of communism that has to crumble and reveal what's underneath it, which is that Marx and a lot of leftist theory are based on a lot of indigenous principles. And these ideas were borrowed. You know, we didn't need a person from Central Europe, no offense, to come to the dark jungles of Latin America and explain to us the concept of collectivism or sharing. These were part of our not just belief system, but our method of survival for 20,000 years. And I think that it goes to show that whether or not whatever administration is in power, that people can't take a moment to relax. And I remind people that many people relaxed during the Obama administration, but the war still continued, and it still got worse. And the Bush doctrine was continued, the knocking over of other countries, and that didn't see our view of the region, because in the world scope, I think people forget that it's not a question of communism or even radical Islam. You know, those aren't the enemies of the United States. And I'm going to repeat that. Radical Islam and communism are not the enemies of the United States. The enemies of the United States are people who say no to the United States. We have plenty of governments like the one in Saudi Arabia that practices a radical Wahhabist sect of Islam. And the people there have all the backing of the United States. They killed a journalist in public, right? They have an illegal war in Yemen that we're supporting, all during the Trump administration, for my friends that are locked into the silly idea that he did nothing wrong during his period of time, that he was a great man. And I've heard both sides of it. And these are people no different than the ones that were backing Obama that we had to sit through for 8 years, tell us how great he is. And I'll end this part of it by saying that one interesting thing about the times is that we realized that Obama made liberals feel like they were progressives, and Trump made stupid people feel smart. So this is what we're dealing with now, right?
That's a great way to put it. I'm glad you mentioned the wars at home and abroad, because they're connected. Domestically, we have the ramping up of the police state, poverty. I mean, just driving, I'm out here in LA, I was driving and I saw so many people waiting in line for food. And I hope we'll get to touch a little bit about Rebel Army Runs, the project that you're involved with.
Sure.
Before we get to that, though, I just want to quickly play a clip from Biden talking about, oh, this is the new America, this is democracy. And I just want to get your response and reaction to that.
Hello, all the participants in tonight's event. It's humbling to stand here in this place in front of these sacred words, humbling out of respect to President Lincoln and the office we now share, and humbling because of you, the American people. As I said earlier today, we have learned again that democracy is precious. And because of you, democracy has prevailed. That's why Jill and I, Kamala and Doug, wanted to make sure our inauguration was not about us, but about you, the American people. This is a great nation. We're a good people. And to overcome the challenges in front of us requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy, unity. It requires us to come together in common love that defines us as Americans, opportunity, liberty, dignity, and respect, and to unite against common foes, hate, violence, disease, and hopelessness. America's story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people. That's the task before us. The only way we'll get through the darkness around us. There are moments in our history when more is asked of us as Americans. We saw that in the Civil War. We saw that with Dr. King dreaming from these steps across the mall. We are in one of those moments now. The pandemic, economic crisis, racial injustice, the climate crisis, and threats to our very democracy. And the question is, are we up to it? Will we meet the moment like our forebears have? I believe we must, and I believe we will. You, the American people, are the reason why. I've never been more optimistic about America than I am this very day. There isn't anything we can't do if we do it together. And that's what you'll see tonight. Stories of ordinary Americans who do extraordinary things. That's how we'll celebrate America and respect and represent America in our time in office. America built of decency. It's built of decency and dignity, of love and healing, of greatness and goodness, of possibilities. This is a story that guides us, inspires us, and unites us today and always. So thank you for this honor. I will give my all to you. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops.
So your response to that, for me, it sounded like a complete load of bullshit. We know Democrats and the Republicans are two heads of the same snake, but just wanted to get your thoughts on Biden.
Listen, I think that these people have someone write great speeches for them, and they sound very inclusive, and they sound really wonderful. But at the end of the day, this is a man who still recognizes Juan Guaido as the head of Venezuela, who he's not. He is an assembly member who was ousted and exiled from the country, and then tried to have a failed Bay of Pigs invasion during the Trump administration with a bunch of ex-Green Beret commandos. Now, mind you, we can have this. I've been to Venezuela twice in the past 10 years. We can have a conversation about what went wrong with the infrastructure and all that. But I think when we talk about the fact that we are still actively, whether it's a Democratic or a Republican party in the past, I mean, honestly, let's speak truth to power. Biden's been in office for less than a week, so it's not like he has a laundry list of things that he's done so far. But we can judge based on the past behavior of the last two Republican and the last two Democratic presidents who have held office, that the war didn't stop and it didn't change. So I have to remind people, especially those that come from the so-called Latino or indigenous background, that pathway to citizenship for 11 million people will include some kind of military service. And the community se tiene que hacer una pregunta y se tiene que realizar algo. And it's not a question of if America will go to war again, but when America will go to war again. And we're going to need fresh bodies. And something that I want to point out on this show is something that I've been preaching in other interviews as well, that this is connected to them refusing to reduce the student loan debt. Why? Because then military enlistment would drop off overnight. How many people have you and me met in our life, young people who said, man, I need some money for college. I need some money to support the family. I'm trying to get ahead. But if that's no longer an option and they're forgiving the debt, then I got no reason to be here risking my life getting a discount to go to college and all this for what? And I think that's when, the truth of it all comes out. And it's sad because there are things that I think, in theory, people like about each of the parties, right? Like, for example, when I get it, to people who live in a society where they've been set up to think that this settler colony that they invented called America was righteous, then law and order sounds like a good thing to them. Then the teachings of Jesus Christ sound like a great thing in theory. But when you use them and try to combine them with, government, that's what these people are forgetting. And as much as, these freak shows claim on the right wing that they're fighting some imaginary communism from Democrats, at the end, we have to ask ourselves, well, what's the final form of the Republican Party? Where are they moving towards? And their option isn't any better because it's fallen into zealotry. They rely on a religious wing of the party, which I think is important for all of us to note. Because you talk about not being able to debate, or that's the big thing that right wingers say, oh, the leftists, they don't want to debate. Well, no, we're not going to go on your YouTube channel to make you money, motherfucker. You want to pick a dojo that's not yours, fine. But the real thing is you can't have a debate with religious people. You and I both know, Ramiro, they're like the people from the church at El Monte. They just believe in the Westboro. There's some Hispanics who belong to the Westboro Baptist Church. These are the people who think that the Spaniards saved our souls by committing genocide. And you and me are laughing, right? But the sad truth is that they exist in people's families who are watching this right now. They'll say, oh, wow, yeah, that's my uncle so-and-so, or that's someone in my family. Yeah, they really think that, this was a good thing that happened, or some inevitable truth, or give it some good spin because it's the world that we live in now. And I tell people, you don't have to justify your reality by justifying the atrocities that happen to you. You know what I mean? Like if you became a success in life and at some point some terrible things happened to you as a child, sure, you overcame that. You shouldn't be thankful for them and say, well, without me being brutally raped and molested as a kid, then I wouldn't be. No, maybe you'd be successful in a totally different way. But how could you think that your success hinged on that? Which is what we have, been programmed to believe. Our success hinges on the empire's victories and military conquests. And somehow we're all partaking in the spoils of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is what's wrong with the right wing and the left. The left doesn't represent worldwide workers here in this country, unfortunately, because they've never asked themselves the really tough questions, which is not, hey, we need a bigger slice of the pie. That's what the left here in America is bitching about. Oh, that pie, these people there's no equality. They're getting more of the pie. Brothers and sisters, the real question is, whose children are baked in that pie, right? How many kids' hands on a conveyor belt are in that pie? Jesus Christ, what are other people in other countries doing to make that pie for us that you want a bigger slice of? Is that pie poison? Is that pie eventually going to kill us all? And there we get into the real kind of crux of things. So when we bring up these things that have to do with politics, I think that they supersede the right versus left kind of a parallel. Because when we talk about healthcare, that's not about communism or socialism. I tell my friends that are skeptical, I say, no, this government during Obama's administration with the Monsanto Act, during Bush's ducking, and during Trump, who completely sidestepped it, because of course he's a coward. They didn't want to tell people about any of the GMOs that are in our food now. They didn't want to talk about any of the things and any of the poison and processed shit that we have to eat. So if the government won't alert you about this so it can collect tax money from corporations that are legally allowed to feed you garbage without labeling it like they do in Europe and Russia, then you have to pay. Oh my God, I can't see my doctor. No, they'll pay for it, motherfucker. Go see who would fucking want. They got to pay for it. Oh, how are they going to afford it? I don't know. Maybe sell a nuke. Fucking some shit. Dismantle some fucked up shit that people don't need no more. So that's where we are, brother.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned the food sovereignty, because it's something that's so important. And even domestically, we see food deserts where Black and brown people out here in LA, for example, if you walk 10 blocks in any direction, you won't see a single store. The closest thing is McDonald's, and they're feeding poison to Black, brown, colonized people, poor people. And then internationally, the U.S. is starving out countries in the global South and Haiti. They're forcing the Haitian people to import their garbage Same thing in Honduras, where my family's from. All over Latin America and the Caribbean, they're starving our people and they're attacking countries that are food sovereign. Nicaragua, which is one of the most food sovereign nations, anti-imperialist countries that the U.S. is imposing sanctions on. And I'm glad you made that domestic and international connection because it's so important. And I think it definitely transcends left versus right. Moving a little bit into some of your music, I just got a chance to get your new video, Who Do We Trust with R.A. the Rugged Man. I thought it was a brilliant video.
That's
his video, but I saw you in the video and I was like, oh, it's such a cool video. And why don't you tell us a little bit about like the political message behind it? Because I thought the lyrics were pretty dope.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, that's not actually the beat that I wrote that to. So I was surprised when I first heard the song. The first beat that they had was something totally different. And I thought it fit the mood. And not that it's better or worse, but to me, it fit the mood. And then R.A. called me one day and he's like, yo, there was some issue with the producer. So something didn't get cleared. I don't know what it was, but they switched the beat like maybe like a month before the video. And then they called me up and we went to Jersey to like this warehouse. And it was kind of like in the middle of everything crazy. And, you know, that's why people had to be so careful in their shooting and making sure that people were socially distant from each other and wearing the masks and stuff. And that was kind of a big expression about all of it. And it brought up some other things. Like people were asking me about the mask and stuff like that, because I have a lot of fans that really do that really think that the entire COVID thing is a hoax. And I explained to them, I said, listen, you have to understand this from my perspective. You guys are on the internet saying 99% people recover, 99%. And I say to them, brothers and sisters, I'm going to use your words. You said that 99% of people recover because they're not as susceptible. What about the 1% of people? They're at risk, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, brothers, while you're yelling and cursing at me wearing a mask while I'm in the projects, you do understand that we're serving food to immunocompromised people. And that's when a lot of these freak shows and conspiracies, not that I love some conspiracies, but some of these people, they came to me later and they were like, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't know this is what you were doing. I thought you were out. And I said, no, you understand there's a difficulty with me discussing a mask mandate, because first, when we do that, we have to ask, how's it going to be enforced in what community? Because about 4 or 5 months ago, we saw a mask mandate in New York City, and downtown, they were handing people masks in Union Square and in Tompkins Square Park and all over Houston Street to white people and tourists. Here's a mask. And uptown, the NYPD tackled a dozen people in front of a fucking wake because there were no masks. So it's not a question of, oh, we don't want people to be safe. No, that's not the point. The point is, are you using these laws that you claim are going to make people safe and just using it to fatten your pockets while controlling us even more? And that's all we're trying to say. It's like the Columbine thing, right? There's some fucking meme that's going around that talks about how after Columbine, well, it's not 100% true, but it's very, the symbolic nature of the meme is true. That after Columbine, the school systems of America hired thousands of security guards and police officers to be in these schools. And they didn't really stop any school shootings, but they managed to arrest almost, 950,000, almost 1 million, the meme says. The meme says 1 million, but it's really less than that. But that's not the point to pick numbers. It's almost 1 million kids that were arrested for some bullshit, for acting up, for stuff that they would have got sent home for or been given in-school suspension, and now they have a criminal record. And it's because you find that a lot of these places are in spots where the local police department or the local county has done business with the private prison that is coming in and saying, hey, we need a quota for this. So sure, like Mr. Trump was a broken clock. He was right twice a day, but I would never set my watch to him. And Mr. Biden's going to be a broken clock too. So there's some right things he's going to do. Like, for example, the divesting from private prisons we heard about today. That's a step in the right direction. I don't know as to the length it's going to go, but you have to always find out what the okie doke is. Just like I told you before, the 11 million pathway to citizenship, we imagine that being Central Americans, but let's be real. we know who a lot of them, the slots are going to go to. European immigrants that have been here quietly sitting in the woodworks, that number, maybe 2-3 million of those 11 million are going to go to them. So automatically we have more than about 30% of those visas already going to people who are here with no papers, but yet it's not that they need to stand in line. Paul Ryan, a Republican, spineless congressman who was out here before he left Congress, that's what he did. He okayed visas for 20,000 Swedish people up in Wisconsin. So we know who they want. So when we say immigration, I think that we have to realize, but they're not talking about just our people. They're talking about making it legal for Russians, a lot of other people that come in here that want a big chunk of that as well. But again, it comes with military service or some kind of option of service in that sense. So it's something that we have to watch out for.
Yeah, and even I saw right before Trump got out of office that he gave some pardon, or he allowed like Venezuelan quote unquote refugees fleeing socialism to stay in the United States. But then you see the treatment, the double standard, because along the US Mexico border, the way that US imperialists treat Central American, Haitian, African migrants at the border, it's just really disgusting.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing is that people pretend like the police aren't a political entity. They very much are. And it's not that every single one of them is racist, but on various levels, they all serve the same racist system. But going beyond that, I don't think we have to make it just about race. I think that they share the political beliefs of the so-called right wing in this country, which is the illusion of law and order. The idea that, oh, we got to do something about these drug addicts. A long time ago, a brother that I met called Dr. Carl Hart from Columbia University did a study about drug addiction. And in the study, he pointed out that it was only, and I think I mentioned this earlier to somebody somewhere, and it pointed out that about 90 to 90%, it said the margin of error was 5, I'm not sure about the exact numbers, but it's roughly that. It was saying that these people were mostly functional drug addicts, and that the 10 to 15% of people that you see on the street, that you see, are when the ratio is out of place and there are just more people that are out there with that. That's when you have an epidemic of that. When you see people on the street, because it's still an epidemic, it's just a noticeable one. It's going on right now. Like when you go to a place in America where you don't see fiends on the street, that doesn't mean that people aren't using heroin. That doesn't mean that people aren't using meth. That means that right now, at this point in their life, they have the problem under what they think is control. So it's not as noticeable. But all drug addiction happens in all communities across the board, and people have been treating it like a moral failing for so many years. And it was convenient for them because all the faces that they had on the news were black and brown faces. And this was the crack era, right? No opioid epidemic. That's not what we called it. However, if we're going to do that, then we have to have some kind of restorative justice program, which means that if we're going to really move ahead in the United States, we need a program that says not only, oh, legalize weed or decriminalize marijuana. No, that's the oversimplified aspect of it. How about all the people that got their voting rights taken away, or were unable to purchase a home, or unable to get a loan for this or that, or had their credibility damaged by this, or lost custody of their child, right? Because of a drug addiction. They should be given the opportunity to get clean so that they can rejoin society in whatever way they feel they can be more useful. But obviously, we don't want people on drugs. We don't want them fucked up. But we've seen that this war on drugs has just been another opportunity for people to line their pockets at the expense of the quota of people, right? And again, there's an old joke that, you don't see alcohol companies, and they never advertise with drunk people. Why? Why? You know what I mean? In the United States, they're not going to advertise their product. Their product is drugs. Good God. This is a big fucking pharmacy. It's like one of John McCain's last statements before he died is he said Russia was a gas station masquerading as a country. And someone came back and said, well, America's a pharmacy masquerading as a republic. And it's fucking, they're both right.
That's true.
But this is a fucking big pharmacy. People coming here for this shit now to get the designer drugs, and then they realize, oh, I don't have to get them here. I get them at Canada, and it's a mess. It's a mess.
And it's designed to keep you dependent as a customer. We see these huge pharmaceutical companies dominating that industry. They want people addicted to opioids. They want people addicted to their pills. Same thing with junk food, with their horrible trash that they're selling as food. And I feel like, I don't know about you, but for me, 2020 was a year of just like really understanding what's important in life. And what I wanted to ask you, pivoting a little bit toward your revolutionary work, not just as an artist, but as an activist, one of the things that I thought was really cool was your work with this project called Rebel Army Runs that you've been raising funds for. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what exactly you've been doing with it?
The Rebel Army Runs is a program that we modeled after the Panther Party free breakfast program. So what the Panther Party program aimed to do was to take care of the most vulnerable people within the community at that particular time. So one of the things that we saw was that elders during the pandemic and the people who were supporting families and staying home with the kids while parents were going out to work seemed like they had no resources backing them. A lot of the elders weren't getting their checks, or they got them late. There were literally hundreds of people out in the street in front of food banks. Hundreds turned into thousands, Ramiro, and it got crazy. So a lot of people contacted us, and they were like, "Hey, man, could you help in any way?" So my assistant and me, we contacted a bunch of different places looking for wholesalers, and we found a company, and we obviously can't put them out there like that unless they ask to be named. But under the condition of anonymity, they sold us basically wholesale priced goods, and these are suppliers for supermarkets across the tri-state area. So basically, we go into the store that would have a supermarket, and I can never go to a supermarket today after this, because when you get 58 cans of tuna for like, you look at it, it's like 12 cents a can. You're like, oh my God, how am I going back to paying $3? But no, it's not for me. We don't touch any of this stuff, and no expense comes out of anything from the program that people are donating, except to buy the food. That's it, the food and the packaging. And then myself and a few other people simply arrange for a 2-week supply of food inside. And unfortunately, we're not able to give fresh fruits or vegetables because that's another city license that they hold on to like they're fucking balls. But we're gonna find a way to get around it. We found a few people to partner with that have the license and give away fresh produce. But what we do is we give away about 2 weeks of food for a family of 3 or 4 people. And then besides the food, which is like pasta, beans, rice, like mac and cheese, soup, I think it's chicken sausage, and just a bunch of ravioli. But we also include some products that people were missing on the shelves. And it's kind of sad, but it's just something that I just got to come out and say. So during the toilet paper shortage, a lot of people didn't realize that there was also a feminine product shortage. So all of the stores were out of maxi pads. Women were using old shirts, and it was offensive to me and other people. So we were like, yo, we got to show up for these ladies too. So we got feminine products. We got the pads. We have Pedialyte for kids. It's basically a fever reducer. We have just light children's medicine like Pepto-Bismol and cough drops, and we have hats and gloves for the kids. And then we also have Pampers, baby food, and just like a couple of other and sometimes toothbrushes and combs and whatever people need. So just the basic goods that someone would need to survive. And at first we did this like every month, and now we do this pretty much every week. We're somewhere. Every week I'm somewhere. Literally tomorrow I'll be in Harlem at Grant Projects giving out 60 packs for 60 families. And what I want to emphasize to the people is that in our community, in the Black and Latino community, a lot of times it's the elders, the grandparents that take care of the kids while the parents are out working. or hustling or working 3 jobs. So when Mr. Trump said, yeah, I created 2 million jobs, a lot of people had 3 of those 2 million new jobs, right? A lot of people said, oh man, I need to pick up another job. They got another job, and it wasn't like that job was a full-time job with benefits. No, when they say they created a job, they created another piece of part-time employment for somebody to clock in some hours. So that's what we're dealing with. And people are trying to make it in this city however they can. And, you know, really, I don't think that the government has been helpful to them and taxes them for no fucking reason, but that's a whole nother story. So what we did is we stepped up, we came to these communities. We did it in Harlem, the Bronx, Brooklyn. We expanded it to LA. My brother Chino Excel took care of a bunch of people on Skid Row, and then just made sure that we could get to a bunch of other locations that have been scheduled. One of them that we actually managed to make a run to was Philadelphia. So I've been a long time supporter of Mumia, and I actually went to visit him in prison. For those people who don't know and are watching your show, some of the younger people, he's an individual who's been held wrongly for the murder and was framed for the murder of a police officer in Philadelphia. And he's been in prison for over 45 years. And this is a man who was the chairman of the communication for the Philadelphia Black Panther Party, and a person who we believe was intentionally framed so that they could get him off the streets. But you know, he's still out there. So we work with the MOVE organization, and we contacted them and a series of other people that I know who actually are grassroots in Philly. And so we went to the neighborhood in West Philly, and we gave out, I think it's 150 food packs to the residents and the people. And some of them were apprehensive at first because it's COVID. So we just dropped it in front of their doors and just stepped back from the porch, and they took it. And they were like, oh, they just waved to us and were like, thank you. So we just doing whatever we can to make sure people get some emergency relief. Yeah, there always has to be a long-term plan. But I think that people forget that while you're dreaming about your long-term plan, there's some immediate things that need to take place. And also, we should never just be comfortable with the immediate change taking place. We need the long-term plan. You know, the long-term plan is that I hope one day we don't need a program like this to feed people, and that we don't take elders for granted in our community. And I feel like that's one thing that I'll say about being from Peru or from anywhere in South America or in Central America, that while the United States is a technologically superior nation, in many ways, it's morally inferior to those places that some people would call shithole countries. Because you know what we don't do in these shithole countries? We don't flush abuelita down the toilet when she turns 85.
Right.
Okay? We don't take grandpa and shove him in a fucking home with a bunch of strangers who nobody fucking knows to get abused and robbed and tortured. That's not what we see as a positive step for our families. Now, I'm sorry if you have a bad relationship with your parents and things have happened, and I can't begin to describe that because that's unfortunate. But by and large, in the community, we want our parents to grow up with us and stay in our families and stay in our lives and be around us. So the concept of just throwing them away or not valuing them or not listening to them. And again, brother, I don't ask the people, the elders, what their fucking politics are. I don't care what the hell you know, you fucking 85, 86 years old. You could believe in whatever the fuck you want to believe, man. Look, I'm glad you made it. You've seen some terrible shit in this city. Cause believe me, if I came to New York in 1981 from Peru as a little kid and I seen some crazy shit in the 80s, then believe me, the people who grew up in Harlem in like 61, 71, it was even worse. So
yeah, most definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned the political prisoners, because we also got to look out for our sisters and brothers locked up right now behind bars by the imperialist state. You know, Russell Maroon Schultz, Simon Trinidad, Leonard Peltier, Mumia, everybody who's been victim to U.S. imperialism, both domestically and abroad. We got to stick together. We got to organize. And I'm glad that you're doing this work, man. I think this is beautiful because it reminds me of the saying that we say in Spanish. It's very popular, especially in Honduras as well. Solo el pueblo salva el pueblo. Only the people will save the people. And I think this is exactly when people talk about like, well, what should we be doing in this time? You know, what should the political situation, like this is exactly the kind of work that we need to be doing, serving the people, serving the community with the things that they need on a day-to-day basis. And so just kind of wrapping up here, because I know you got to bounce soon. I just wanted to ask people, like, how can people help out with Rebel Army Runs, support you, follow your work, and if you have anything coming up soon?
Well, the GoFundMe link is active on my IG at Tech Immortal and on my Facebook. And just wanted to remind people, this was something that just kind of came together and happened. Like we were doing a march in New York, marchando Latinos por las vidas negras. So that was a show of display and solidarity from the Dominican community and lots of Afro Latinos all over the Bronx that came down to Harlem. And at this spot, I had met just a bunch of other people that were like-minded, and they appreciated what I was doing, and they wanted to help me. So they came and gave like donations just off rip, just people in the streets. So we said, man, we got to make this wider. So we opened a GoFundMe, and then we applied for a 501c3 so that all donations can be tax deductible for anybody that donates. So we should have those papers cleared in the next couple of months because we applied months ago and it just takes time. But yeah, it's something that we felt was extremely necessary in this time, and also to remind the people not just with words but with actions. You know what I mean? I think it's wonderful that we can come out and give these symbolic measures. You know, sure, representation matters, but representation doesn't mean just showing. Representation to me means showing and proving, right? You represent something, which means you've put in work to represent something, which means don't give me something just symbolic, give me something tangible. And this is something tangible. And when I say tangible, I mean it's because the vast majority of the people, depending on what project we go to, are of a demographic that is sometimes downtrodden or not looked upon. But definitely across the board, they all are, because you run it into people that are elderly who have been abandoned by the system. So if we're in Brooklyn at Albany houses, yes, the majority of people there will be African American. If we're at the Dykeman houses uptown, then the vast majority of the people who are up there will be Dominican, right? If we do something at the Isaac houses in Manhattan, then I'll show you a project, brother, where people who know Manhattan know, man, that project has all kind of people, white people, poor Asian people, broke. It's just people who don't have families, who don't have a kid to take care of them, or sometimes for whatever reason, they were down on their luck and they found themselves in this situation. And God bless that there's some net for them. You know, that's the one thing I remind people about this country that's slightly different about the places that we come from when we migrate here. And that's that in our countries, we've been conditioned to see things and not be outraged by them. But in this society, things that are normal are outrageous, and yet they would be outraged at that. So it's normal that we drop bombs on somewhere far away and that we didn't see them and thousands of people died. And seeing a homeless person is normal, right? But seeing a homeless kid would bother people in America. They would have to do something. You know what I mean? Like you and me are New Yorkers, bro. We don't give a fuck about much. You know, I'm not gonna look at somebody's accident. It's whatever. But you and I both know if we see a 9-year-old kid wrapped in a blanket begging for change, that doesn't fly here in New York City. The housing authority, you know, the ACS, somebody's coming to see that kid because they can't have that. So there's certain things that they can tolerate and say, oh yeah, that's fine. But this is too much. When in reality, you have to realize, why do you think we have people who are homeless as adults? Because a lot of them were homeless as children because they come from families that were homeless as well. What's wrong with y'all? Y'all, you sitting here too busy being outraged and being reactive instead of being proactive, which is what I think these political factions need to get away from. You know what I mean? Instead of reactionary action, people have to have proactive action. So that's what we did with the Rebel Army runs, to say, hey, listen, you know, to me, man, during the pandemic, brother, my numbers went up. More people wanted to listen to my music. They wanted to listen to that style of stuff. Revolutionary Volume 1 has dead cops on the front cover, slaughtered by government agents. I told people, when they come get your guns, who do you think it's going to be? Some liberal with pink hair? No, it's going to be the police that you've been sucking dick for the past 50 years. Those niggas you've been sucking dick for with the blue flag in the middle of, they're going to come take your fucking guns. Not me. I don't want them. What the fuck? I don't want your fucking Remington rifle, you jackass. But you've been fighting the wrong people this whole time. See, that's the sad thing about working class white Americans. They've been hoodwinked by their own government, right? They got 20 cookies on the table. There's an immigrant, a banker, and a worker at the table, right? The banker steals 19 of the 20 cookies, and then he tells the white-collar American worker, look out, this immigrant is going to steal your cookie. Right. What about all them other cookies you put in your fucking bank that really belong to the American worker? Maybe if we weren't robbing them so often, you wouldn't have to deflect and blame everything on the brown people that come to this country and do everything.
Yeah, well, good point, man. And unfortunately, even in our communities too, you have some Latinos who are like, yo, look at these undocumented people coming and stealing our jobs. And I'm glad you really called that out, man. But bro,
let me just touch on one thing. Just really quick, Ramiro, and then I'll let you go, because I know we go with that shit to do. The vast majority of people, now let me say this again for your audience at home. The vast majority of people who I have met, who are Latinos for Trump type people whose families I've known, most of those people came here without papers, and they're hypocrites because they think it was okay then, but now it's not for some whatever reason. So you'll find Mexican, like, bro, I tell people all the time, I know somebody dear to my family, you know what I mean? I used to date Shorty Rock and his family, but this brother, that's not even his real name. I'm like, yo, fam, how could you be mad at these immigrants on TV? Because they're not even immigrants, they're migrants. They migrated up and down for thousands of years. You're the immigrant. The other people who came here and telling them they can't be here, those are the immigrants. And on top of it, you're really gonna tell me here that them coming to rip you out from where you are and throw you out, that would be an injustice. But it's not an injustice when it happens to these people. And I think you got to remember, a lot of that hypocrisy is rooted in this kind of mixture of the right wing with religion and with a false sense of Christianity. So this sense that I have to be a hypocrite in some way, shape, or form because I'm imperfect as compared to our Lord Jesus Christ. See, this is the problem. Jesus would not respect you. Jesus would have spit on you, because this is the type of person that you guys are idolizing, not this meek character who sits idly by while children get bombed. No, Jesus Christ would be in front of the Capitol building right now saying, hey, we don't want to storm your building, but we're going to stand in a big chain around here, and we're not going to move until we all die, until you stop bombing shit. And I think that's what people forget. And instead, they have this wrong picture in their mind of a militant psychopath who agrees with this type of stuff. And it's gotten to the point where it's metamorphosized into something else. But again, neoliberals take advantage of that all the time. And they say, oh, these people are racist. They're so terrible. And in the meantime, well, if they're so terrible, then how come you keep helping them? Right? How come you keep aiding and abetting them? How come you're like the silent parent in an abusive home? When the other parent's being abusive and you don't do nothing about it, then you're just as much to blame. Now, are you as much to blame as the person doing the abusing? That's a matter of opinion for whoever the person is in that scenario. But let me tell you something. Y'all both guilty of something. So that's where we are right now, man. We're trying to get from up under this. And we know that both sides of the system are guilty of taking advantage of us. And we just got to keep, traversing the waters, trying to make it through. But I remind my people, we have survived worse than the present individuals who are here. Like, for people who say that like Mr. Biden's the worst thing or Mr. Trump is the worst thing, I remind people, we had Andrew Jackson as president. This man was a war criminal, a murderer, a genocide maker, a baby killer. Come on now, please. You know?
Yeah, definitely. And even abroad too, we've had some horrible right-wing dictators, you know, the Operation Condor. Our people have gone through so much shit and we're still continuing to resist. And I'm glad that you're doing the work with Rebel Army Runs. Bro, Immortal Technique, Felipe Coronel, award-winning revolutionary hip-hop artist with roots in Peru and Harlem. For everybody watching and listening, please go and support GoFundMe.com/Rebel Army Runs. This is, if you want to do revolutionary work and serve the people, this is it right here in the hoods of the New York, LA, the US, serving the people. And I'm glad that someone, a good comrade like Immortal Technique, is involved in this work. Shout out to John Rivera, to Jenny Lynn, to Carlos, to Nick, to Ophelia, to Rich, to Yamir, to all the comrades watching and listening. Thank you so much, Felipe. It's been a pleasure having you on, bro. I hope everything is well for you, and I hope to talk to you soon, man. I hope everything's good. Take care, bro.
Thank you for having me on the show, man. And we're gonna keep doing the work, because I remind people, revolution is not sexy. You know what I mean? It's not. Yeah. It's not easy. You know, just to leave you, when I went to Venezuela, I went to the jungle, and there was a radio station, and the radio station's chief operator was a 14-year-old kid, and the place ran like clockwork. And I was like, who the fuck is in charge? A little 14-year-old kid with his little Venezuelan uniform and his socialist hat. And I was just like, our people are capable of so much. And remember, revolution is not easy. It's not sexy. You know, from one extent to another, it requires some annoying work, some tedious shit, but it pays out in the end because you feed the soul. And some people, man, God bless y'all, don't believe in the soul. That's fine, and that's cool. And we're all allowed to believe in what we want to believe in. But my belief allows me to press forward and to help people, not because I think I'll be rewarded for the good things that I did, but because the good things that I did are my reward. And that's how I live my life.
It's a great note to end, man. I hope you have a great day, bro. And thanks again, Immortal Technique. Go and follow him. Go and support Rebel Army Runs. Serve the people. Peace out, y'all. Take care.
Thank you, Ramiro, for having me on the show. Peace out.